To this React series part 1, where I will be talking about React functional components. So in this lesson, I will be using create React app, and I will include the exact template that I'm using here right now in the GitHub repo, so you can download it and run npm install in the same directory to download the dependencies. In this case, we just have a basic create React app template, but I have removed most of the styling as well as additional elements within the component. So if we run npm start and go to localhost 3000, as you can see, I just have h1 saying hello components. All right, so to create a functional component, let's first create a folder called components. All right. In this case, I will, as an example, I'll create a component called message, so we can pass props and display and render the results within the component and play around with it. So let's call it message. All right, before we create any type of component within React, we have to import the React module. So let's import React from React. And when it comes to functional components, we can either use ES6 arrow functions or a regular function. So in this case, we can use function message, and we will return the elements that we want to render. We use parentheses if you want to return multiple lines of code. But if you have an element that you want to return, let's say in this case h1 hello message, you can either do that, but if you have multiple elements, you have to use parentheses. So in this case, we will use parentheses and open up hello message. Another thing to point out is that, let's say if we want to return h1 tag with a paragraph called this is a prop, and later on we will pass a prop next to it, but let's say we have a paragraph tag. As you can see, we have an error indicating that we have to actually wrap those p tag and h1 tag into a parent element. JSX is the syntax that React uses. So in this case, JSX requires for us to wrap it multiple elements to a parent element. In this case, we can use either div tags to wrap our elements into, or if you want to avoid excessive div use, you can use what's called a section, and you can achieve it like that. All right. So this is the simple example of functional component. Let's say if we wanted to export our component and make it available for other parts of the code to use, we can achieve that either by exporting like this, export default and name of the component. Or what we can do is we can use named export. So in the JavaScript modules, you can make your code available by either using export default or a named export. We can achieve the name export by just putting export next to the function declaration. So let's say in this case we have a regular function. Let's have an arrow function, const, let's say message 1 equals an arrow function that will return a simple set of elements. Let's say we'll just do h2 hello from message 1. Oh, we forgot return, so we have to return. So if we want to make this piece of code available, we have to put export before the declaration. In this case, both of the functions are exported and available to use. So let's save it and let's go back to our app.js. To use the components that we just created, we have to import it. Let's do import message from, let's go to the directory and select the message. All right. I just wanted to point out one thing. When you use a export default, it doesn't matter what you name your component. It doesn't have to match the name of the function. In this case, it can be message, it can be M, it can be anything you want. But when you are using a named export, the naming has to match whatever the function that you're exporting. So in this case, if we wanted to use this block of code, we have to put comma, curly brackets, and the name of the function, and it has to match. All right, so let's try to render both of these components. The way that we render the component is by calling it within tags. The JSX is a mixture of HTML and JavaScript. So that's how we are able to use HTML tags. In this case, when we create an element, a new component, new element, it sort of resembles an HTML tag. All right, so let's save it and go back to our app. As you can see, we're exporting hello message with a prop. They all wrapped within a div. So that's how we're getting those two elements together. Now let's import the message 1 and see what we're gonna get. Message 1 and save it. All right, as you can see, we have a message 1 in H2 element that's being rendered into the app.js. And the last thing I wanted to go over is how we can pass and work with props. So the way that we can pass props into a component is by naming it first. So let's say we want to pass a generic message, right? Message equals hello from props. All right, let's save it. And the way that we use whatever is passed, we have to capture the element with props. And the way we can display it is using curly brackets. And we're going to call our element props right here, props dot message. Name of the variable needs to match whatever the naming we use in the parent component. So those two, message here and message here, needs to match. All right, when we save it and go back, as you can see, this is the prop, hello from props. That's where we passed into the message component. All right, and I just wanted to point out different ways and different data types that we can pass with props. So in this case, we'll just use a regular string. But what if you wanted to pass, let's say, an integer or an array or an object? You would think that you can just do message equals and 2, but it just gives you an error. So for you to pass a different data types, you have to wrap them within a curly brackets. All right, so if we want to pass 2 and save, 2 is passed. Or let's say if we want to pass an object, let me just declare a couple variables. Let's say we have a const customer, and we have a customer information. Because usually the way you will work with React is, since it's such a dynamic library, you usually pass a JSON file or some sort of information from the database into your front end. And in the front end, you can parse the data, and usually that data in the form of JSON or some sort of data type. So in this case, let's say we have a name, Alex, and age, say 60. So we have a customer named Alex, and he's 60 years old. The way we pass customer is by calling it within the curly bracket, customer. All right, let's say, oh, actually I couldn't spell it. Customer, here we go. All right. And the way we access the elements within the object is by saying, in this case, customer. Let's say we want to see who the customer is, .name. And if we save it and go name undefined. Oh, in this case it's message. Sorry, I forgot to rename it. Let's save it. All right, as you can see, this is a prop and the name is Alex. It just follows the normal object convention. When you want to access at different parts of an object, you just use dot notation, name, or in this case, let's do age. As you can see, it just passes it to the component, and we're accessing it via props. And it's it usually is the case where we name the props, but you don't have to. When it comes to functional components, you don't have to name it props. You can say, let's say values. And if you have values here and save it, your app still works. But I don't think that that's the case when it comes to class components. But we will talk about it in the next video. But you just follow the convention. It's usually easier for us to name props because it's just self-explanatory. All right. Yeah, and also my advice would be, if you're just getting into React, don't be afraid to break the code. Just pass different elements, do some computations with it, and see what you can accomplish. I usually find myself struggling with just following whatever the tutorial is and leaving as is. But over time, I found it more useful for me to play around with it and just try to break it in as many ways as possible. I think that's the best way to learn. That's the best way you're going to see what works and what doesn't. So in the next part of the video, I will go over class components and how we can manage state and props when it comes to class components. Yeah, thank you for watching and have a nice day.